Today is a day when our proceedings will be transmitted by live transmission, subject to a 10-minute delay. Therefore, the usual rules apply. Those who have electronic devices may use them to transmit silently to the outside world what they have heard, but only 10 minutes after the event that they're describing. Such devices may not be used for recording proceedings or taking photographs. Yes. Could the witness be sworn, please?
Would you like to stand, please? Take the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit down.
Yes. Before you begin questioning, may I express a view which I trust is shared by everybody in the room. Today we are going to hear from two witnesses who have lost sons through violence. Can their evidence please be treated with the quiet and respect which it deserves?
Good morning, Mr. Adams.
Morning.
My name is Afra Bruce Jones and I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of counsel to the inquiry. First of all, can you please tell us what's your full name?
Richard Nelson Adams.
Mr. Adams, you produced a witness statement for this inquiry dated the 27th of June 2024. This statement consists of 24 pages and you also provided exhibits to that statement numbering some 100 pages. Do you confirm that that witness statement is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
That puts the whole of your witness statement as evidence before the inquiry today, and if it hasn't already, it will be published on the inquiry website in due course. Mr. Adams, I'm going to ask you some questions about the Roland Adams Family Campaign, which was set up by you and your wife following the murder of your son, Roland, and the attack on Roland's brother, Nathan, which occurred on the 21st of February 1991. And I will also ask you about some intelligence reports filed by undercover police officers which related to your campaign. But before I do that, I'd like to ask you a bit about Roland and your family. Can I ask that the picture of Roland Adams be put up on the screen, please? Mr. Adams, is it correct that Roland was born on the 21st of March of 1975?
Yes.
And was he your firstborn child?
Yes.
Can you tell us, what was Roland like as your son?
Well, starting from a baby. Well, he was a quiet, lovely little boy, very pretty, as I was told then. And he was a studious little boy and cheerful, smiley, as a baby and a toddler. And then his brother came along, and they got on together as brothers do, and they played a lot of football and did lots of sports. They read and did usual things that boys do, and and I did my part as a dad. I supported whatever they needed, and I sort of like steered them in the right type of way without channel them in the right way, rather than cut off exuberance, channel it more than cut it off. And they were lovely boys, yeah.
You said that Roland and Nathan together were really interested in football and sports.
Yeah,
Is
and
it
music.
Right? Music.
Yeah, and music, yeah.
What sort of music were they into?
Well, before Roland died, Roland and Nathan, they built with my help, they built a music studio in their room. They had guitars, they had drum machines and all sorts of, things associated with producing and engineering music. And they had a bit of a fan base because they had quite a lot of visitors, that came and jammed and sang and rapped and all the rest of it with them.
And is it right that your family at this time lived in Abbey Wood?
Yes.
And when did you move there?
I need to look it up, but I think it's about 1986, roughly. Yeah.
And Abbey Wood, just to be clear for those of us who aren't necessarily sure, it's geographically an area next to Thamesmead, is that right?
Yeah. I think, I've been down there recently, and it's nothing like what it was then, because Abbey Wood and Thamesmead were distinctly different, and separated by lack of infrastructure and vegetation and stuff like that. Now that it's more built up, you can sort of like just stumble across, and so it was geographically separate in a lot of respects then.
Can we take the photograph down, please? Mr. Adams, in the witness statement that your family provided to the inquiry, your son Nathan describes his memories of what happened the day that Roland was murdered. So I'm going to summarise that part of the witness statement now, but if I miss out any details, please add to it when I have finished. And sir, just to say, I just want to warn that in the summary I am about to read, there will be reference to racially offensive language, but having sought permission from Mr. Adams, I am going to use the words. Nathan Adams gives this account of what happened on the 21st of February 1991 when he was with Roland. On the 21st of February 1991, 15-year-old Roland and 14-year-old Nathan had gone to the Hawksmoor Youth Club in Thamesmead. They were going to play table tennis and collect some records back from someone whom they had lent them to. On the way to the youth club, Roland and Nathan had met an individual who said to him, "This is a Ku Klux Klan area. You're not allowed here." Nathan says that this worried them. After they had finished at the youth club, collected the records, Roland and Nathan were waiting at the bus stop to catch the bus home when they were confronted by a group of aggressive young white men. Nathan was hit on the head, and as a result, his memories of what happened are a little hazy, but he heard what he thought was a stone hit the bus stop. Roland then started to run whilst holding his neck. Nathan says at that point he was frozen to the spot, and only when Roland turned to him and told him to run did he too run away. He tripped and heard members of the attacking group laugh and say, "Kill the nigger." Roland ran up over the flyover, and Nathan ran underneath the flyover to try to meet him on the other side. But when he got to the other side, Roland was not there, so Nathan ran back up over the flyover. Whilst he was doing so, he saw another male on a bus who waved at him and told him that Roland was lying on the floor at the bus stop. Nathan says this confused him. He didn't know why Roland would be lying on the floor. He ran to the bus stop and he saw Roland lying on the floor with lots of police around him. Nathan said he laid over Roland, trying to protect him and keep him warm. An ambulance came. They treated him at the roadside, including putting things down his throat and giving him shocks to resuscitate him. Nathan went with Roland in the ambulance to the hospital. At the hospital, Roland was dragged off the ambulance and taken away to be treated. Nathan didn't know where he had been taken. Sometime afterwards, a nurse or a doctor came to tell Nathan that they were very sorry, but that his brother was dead. Nathan was taken to see Roland by two nurses. He gave Roland a kiss and learnt that he had died from a stab to the throat. Nathan tried to run out of the hospital, but he was restrained by two police officers, including one who put him in a headlock. He was taken to the police station and questioned. He was covered in Roland's blood, and his own blood, from where he had been hit on the head by a group of people who attacked him. Various swabs were taken from him, His forehead was swollen, and his face was bloody, where he had been hit on the head by the attackers. The police asked Nathan whom he had assaulted and where the knife was. They gave him the impression they didn't believe he could be a victim. Nathan says, and I quote this from the witness statement at paragraph 3.12, "When I was let out, family members were there. The records we had collected from the individuals spilled out from my jacket onto the floor. They were all soaked in blood, and that is when the family learnt how much blood Roland had lost." Mr. Adams, if I've left out any details from Nathan's account that you think the inquiry should hear today, please feel free to add them now.
I think Nathan is the only person that could have given that statement, really.
Mr. Adams, in your witness statement, you say that your understanding of how Roland died deepened as time went on. You say that Roland was murdered and Nathan was attacked by members of a gang called the Nazi Turnouts, a group also called the KKK or the Goldfish Gang, and they were identified by some as something of a BNP youth movement. Do you remember how you came to know this or where this information came from?
Well, the reality is that there are families suffering in silence for many years in Thamesmead. This gang or these gangs were well known to the police at the time, unbeknown to ourselves. Otherwise, I wouldn't have moved my children into that area at all. But so after Roland died and these families noticed that we had somewhat of a public profile, if you want to call it that, but the media was around us because we suffered the death of our child. The media wasn't interested in the barbarism that these families were subjected to before. So these families sought to come to us for either support because they thought we were better connected than they were or whatever. But they started telling us their stories because our son just got caught up in a bad situation, really. These people were in fear and in terror, being brutalized, being hospitalized, and all the rest of it. So they came to us to tell us what it is really like. We had no idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't have subjected my children to that.
So it became clear after what had happened that there was a problem with racist violence in that area.
Yeah.
In terms of the arrests following Roland's murder, I think you say in your witness statement that 9 individuals were arrested in the week following the murder. 1 person was charged with his murder, 4 with violent disorder, and the others were not charged. Is that correct?
Yes.
The person who was charged was named Mark Thornborough, and he was in due course convicted of Roland's murder. Was anybody prosecuted for the attack on Nathan?
No, not to this day. I've often asked the question, with so-called liaison officers and the police generally, and I even had a solicitor at the time, and we sought to ask those questions. It's never been answered to this day, really.
During the course of the murder investigation, were you being kept up to date to some extent by the police as to what was going on?
We had this person that we now know was the liaison officer, Mr. Fisher, I believe his name was, or PC Fisher. And the majority of times that he visited us was to tell us that more perpetrators were being bailed or released from custody.
Were you told whether the police were investigating this as a racist crime?
Well, it was never prosecuted as a racist crime. I've had numerous discussions with the police up to the trial, about why it wasn't seen as a racist crime, and all the evidence suggested that, and all the gang members were associated with the far right, if you want to call it that, and in their own words, how they described my children, the N-word, as you call it, nigger, and all the rest at the time, clearly suggested that that was the motive. But the police and the CPS, the local authority, and all the rest of them, because it can only be a connivance in my mind that they all came to the wrong conclusion that it wasn't a racist murder when all the evidence was staring them in the face. It was even written. And I'm very grateful to the presiding judge at the time, because he was the only person in the cold light of day looking at all the evidence, and he, to this day, is the only person from all of the government officials, if you want to call them that has stated clearly that it was a racist murder, and he's totally impartial, had nothing to do with Thamesmead. He just looked at the evidence himself. I just find it ironic and strange that, and I think that's what gave fuel and power to these individuals, who were terrorizing a neighborhood for years, is the inaction of all of those authorities who basically connive to sweep something like this under the table. It's as though it's their kith and kin, the way they protected them. I just don't get it. Yeah.
And as you say, the presiding judge was the one who described that murder as racist, and indeed when he sentenced Mark Thornborough, he sentenced him accordingly.
Yes.
I'm going to ask that we bring up one of the exhibits that you provided to the inquiry, Mr. Adams. It's document UCPI 27042, and it's A2 within the hard copy bundle.
Will it be shown on my screen?
Yes, it will come up on your screen. Oh, sorry, it's 37042. That's my mistake. Thank you. So, Mr. Adams, I think this is a flyer that was created, and we can see it's for a march that was to be held on the 27th of April 91. But I just wanted to focus on the graphic in the top. I think, is this a graphic that you designed?
Yeah, I designed it and wrote the article. In those days, there wasn't computers and all the rest of it. That's why this is, by today's standard, called crude. But, this is what we had to do at the time, is to create our own imagery and posters and get them printed at our own cost too. Yeah.
And we can see on that graphic with Roland's name and his picture, and the date he was born and died. And then you've written "slaughtered by racist society." It might seem obvious, but are you able to explain to us why you use those words, "slaughtered by racist society"?
I think I've explained as much already. I mean, if you've got rogue people, if you like, racists running around and causing havoc and killing people, they would be brought to justice and charged accordingly. Here we had a local authority, the local police, the CPS, the general judiciary, magistrates, and all the rest of it were denying that this was a racist murder. For my wife and I, it's clearly a societal problem. So, and that's why I state it as such. It is slaughtered by a racist society. This could have gone on forever like this, if it wasn't for that judge intervening and stating clearly that what has happened. It is a societal problem that we had then. I can't talk about any other case, but clearly, in this instance, it's clearly my son was clearly slaughtered by a racist society.
You told us that after Roland's death, you came to learn from people in the area about the issues of racism in Thamesmead. And I think in your witness statement, you talk about a location, the Wildfowler pub. What did you come to learn about this particular pub?
Again, all of this is after the event. Yeah.
And what is it that you came to learn about the pub after the event?
Yeah.
I think you put in your witness statement that the NTO, the Nazi turnouts, used to congregate outside the off-licence next to the Wildfowler pub. This is at paragraph 3.16. You say this was near the Hawksmoor Youth Club. The Wildflower pub was well known to be a meeting point for BNP members and a centre of drug dealing. Did you find out anything about the leader of the Hawksmoor Youth Club and their view of racist attacks in the area?
Well, one of the youth leaders, or a lady that worked there called Anne Brewster, her children were subjected to the same sort of beatings and chasing and the rest. So we learned from her.
Paragraph 3.17 of your statement, you say, I learnt that the youth leader of the Hawksmoor Youth Club had become increasingly worried about incidents of racist attacks in the area in the months leading up to the attack, and had in fact asked Greenwich Council and the police to help bring it to an end, but they didn't.
Yes, that's right, yeah. It concurs with what I've been saying. It wasn't news to the police, it wasn't news to the local authority. It was an age-old problem that they had there. They were outnumbered on the outskirts of Greenwich, if you like, and they were being bullied, and and nothing was done about it.
In the immediate aftermath of Roland's murder, was there any further threats to your family?
Yeah, we kept getting anonymous phone calls. Sometimes there was nothing said. Sometimes there was just breathing. Sometimes there are obscenities. Sometimes reveling in the fact that my son had died and my other son was similar, attacked. And yeah.
In your witness statement at paragraph 4.5, you say that Nathan was hospitalised a week after the attack, where the hospital received threats to the effect that they were coming down to finish off what they started, and the hospital were the ones who warned you of this. What was the police's response to this, if you can remember?
Apathy. You know, they thought we were making a mountain out of a molehill and all the rest of it. And I feared for my son's life, because the mere fact that these people had intelligence, if you like, that my son was in hospital, you know, and they were clearly plugged into what's going on in the area, either via the police or whatever. You know, we didn't know who to trust, because I don't know how these people can have all of this information, and they appear to be just odd people, you know, attacking black people. So, you know, I really feared for my son's life. And I mean, you know, as you can imagine, I just lost one, my wife. You know, with the family at a great loss, and for my surviving son to be threatened, and yeah, and I had to ask the police that, you know, for them to provide protection of my son in hospital.
And did they provide that protection?
No. So I when they refused to provide protection, I told them that, well, I will have to provide the protection for my son with my family members. And I think that's when they started thinking, we don't want, you know, loads of black men, if you like, standing guard on a hospital ward and at the front gate and all the rest of it. So they decided that they would now provide a solitary police officer at his bedside. That's the only way that we got that type of protection.
Thank you. Can we take that document down, please? Mr. Adams, were there... well, in your witness statement, you make reference to various other incidents in the wider community that occurred in the period after Roland's murder. Can you tell us about some of these? For example, I think at paragraph 4.6 or 4.7, you explain that the youth club, the Hawksmoor Youth Club, where Roland and Nathan had been the night of the attack, was firebombed.
Well, I don't know too much about it. I mean, this is hearsay, and it turned out to be facts. I mean, the youth club being firebombed is, you know, it's not something that I would know too much about, except the knowledge that it had been.
At paragraph 4.10 of your witness statement, you explained that you had a commemoration for Roland on the 28th of February 1991, where you laid wreaths at the spot where Roland died. And you then say that someone or a group later burnt those wreaths.
Yeah, and I think that was a big issue for us. You know, it disrespectful and desecrated, because we did prayers and all sorts there. That made us know that we couldn't actually bury Roland in that borough, and you know, we buried Roland in a completely different borough, because we couldn't have people who clearly had their finger on the pulse and could get information about my son's whereabouts. They certainly could get information about where my son would be buried as well. So we buried him out of the borough to not have his grave desecrated like his memorial or where we laid wreaths.
And then one final example I want to just reference that in your witness statement at paragraph 4.23, you say that during this time the BNP leafleted our neighbours' houses in our estate. Some of our neighbours came to us to commiserate. We were the only house in the estate that did not receive a leaflet, and we realised that the BNP knew where we lived. That was frightening.
Yeah, it's back to this intelligence-led, if you like, where these so-called nobodies can have that level of information about our address, about my son being in hospital and all the rest of it, it clearly is frightening to think that an organization like the BNP or renegade racists, if you like, can have so much information about our family and families and intimidate. It's astonishing that, and our neighbors brought the leaflet to show us as well. The leaflet was of a battered white elderly woman who they, on the flyer, just like our flyer, instead of having Roland's face on it, if you can imagine, you had a battered white lady, elderly, allegedly battered by a black person, I would suggest, and that's how they were recruiting new members. Yeah.
Mr. Adams, in the context of all this that was happening, you founded the Roland Adams Family Campaign, and I believe you founded the campaign with your wife Audrey. Is that correct?
Yes, but it wasn't just, we've got family, Audrey's family, my family. We all, were very saddened by Roland's death. Everybody contributed. We were, don't get me wrong, we were at the forefront, but we were mainly the face of it. But all our family members were heavily involved. We were all very hurt and traumatized by it.
And how did you come to make the decision to form the campaign?
Well, we knew from the outset that, like I mentioned before, the connivance of all the government officials, if you like, without, naming them separately. We knew from the outset that, we weren't going to get justice. We had factual accounts of what transpired on the night, what happened to our children, and what has happened to children who were living this daily nightmare, telling us what was happening in the area. So the family campaign was on many fronts different. We were there to bring about awareness so unsuspecting parents like ourselves wouldn't inadvertently buy houses and set up home in those areas and subject their children to the same ordeals and stuff like that. We were trying also to, encourage support to those families in the area. We were using the campaign to, get the local authorities to move some of these people out. We also physically helped families move out. We physically helped. We also put up families in our own homes who were at risk as well. The campaign was on many fronts, and we were supporting other campaigns who have suffered similarly in other areas as well. It was quite broad and honest. Yeah.
I'm going to ask that you bring up a document. It's UCPI 37043. It's A17 in the bundle. And Mr. Adams, what I'm bringing up now are the minutes of the inaugural meeting of the campaign. I'll just wait for the computer to catch up. Okay. We can see at the top there, inaugural meeting of the Roland Adams Support Campaign Committee and where it was being held. It's a slightly different name, but I think the name of the campaign just changed slightly as it went on. We can see from these minutes, first of all, the attendees, at this meeting. Obviously, the names have been redacted for privacy, but we can see the organisations that they represented. But just wanted to draw attention to a couple of these. The second one down, GACARA, which I think stands for the Greenwich Action Committee Against Racial Attacks. And then further down, Central Race Equality Unit. Were you in touch with these organisations before the first meeting of the campaign?
I think GACARA, the GACARA, I'm sure that probably Dev Bara might have contacted us, because of what happened to our family.
Was that a group that was within the local government, within the council, or was it?
It was. I think it was funded by the local authority.
And if we just turn to page 3 of this exhibit, the first line states there that this was the first meeting to launch the Roland Adams support campaign and the struggle to combat racial attacks and harassment in the London Borough of Greenwich, Thamesmead and Bexley areas. And you told us a minute ago that one of the things that you were doing was helping families who wanted to move out of the area due to this kind of racial harassment or racial attacks. Was this something that you were aware was happening before the campaign was set up, or were you aware of the level of racial harassment other families were experiencing?
As I've said from the outset, there is no way that I would have moved my family into that vicinity if I felt that there was any issue with racism and all that. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but I've been in this country for 60 years now, and I know, I've had difficulties with racism and all of that. My father had, my son has had, and and if I bring it to 2024, my grandson has. These 4 generations, we know all about racism. I don't know if I've gone off tangent, and you might have to repeat the question, because it is an emotional subject for me.
Of course. What I was asking you about was the movement of families out of the area due to racist harassment and how the campaign assisted them.
Yeah, I didn't have nothing to do with it before my son died. It was something I knew. I didn't have no idea that this area was so terrible, and I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole was until my son died.
Can we take that document down, please?
Yeah.
And is it correct that, in fact, the local authority then did help several families to move out of the area and funded them to do so?
Yeah, I believe that's true, because I think part of the campaign was about, publicizing and bringing about awareness and making the local authority, because it's an embarrassment to the local authority to have their inaction in the public domain.
Mr. Adams, in your witness statement, just get the right section, I think it's paragraph 4.27, you talk about how black families, both within the family campaign and outside the campaign, were frightened about how, you say, we were frightened about how we could keep our children safe and keep them out of the violence. And we went through a period of believing that self-defence groups should be set up. We did not set them up, but we did support those who had been attacked. For how long were you considering setting up self-defence groups?
Well, the campaign is not just about me and my family, because the reality is we had already lost Roland. I mean, there's nothing we could do for Roland. This was about trying to save their lives and keep young black boys in particular out of trouble. We were there trying to use our grief and our pain to help others. You know, there's nothing we could do for Roland. And it was all about bringing about awareness, trying to get things in place that wasn't in place for them, trying to stop them from becoming perpetrators from a victim, because, you know, that was what it's all about, really. We had lots of, away from the campaign, we also met a lot with parents whose children were being attacked on a daily basis, and we were encouraging each other to stop our children from becoming perpetrators and stop our children from being attacked, and, you know, giving them the wisdom of our knowledge, and, you know, bringing in support groups who could help, or individuals who could help turn these children or steer these children away from problems, because I could see it exploding into something whereby our children would become just as bad as these racists. You know, we wanted to avoid that. Yeah.
You also tell us in your witness statement how in April of 1991, you and your family were told that you needed to move house immediately due to being in danger. Can you tell us, who was it who told you that?
I believe, you know, it's 33 years ago. I believe it was Mavis Clark and Baroness Howells. You know, she wasn't a baroness at that time, but we were told, you know, and Noel Penstone, he was another officer from the council. It was those sort of solid individuals who were either plugged into the system more than we were, that advised us that they had good reasons to suspect that our family was in imminent danger. Yeah.
And you did, in fact, move straight away, is that correct? I'd like to bring up another document. It's a second set of meetings of the campaign. Reference is UCPI 37059. It's at A27. And Mr. Adams, this is a set of meeting minutes for the Roland Adams Family Campaign dated the 20th of June 1991. And again, there's the usual agenda and some notes, but I just want to read out at paragraph 1 the aims and objectives of the campaign, because this is the first time we've seen them written down. And it says this: the primary aims and objectives of the campaign were agreed to be the following. 1, to close the BNP headquarters / bookshop as soon as possible. 2, to organise a boycott of the Wildflower Pub. 3, to organise publicity and campaign around the racists who murdered Roland Adams and Orville Blair. 4, to organise publicity and campaign around the people who were arrested at the demonstration or protest against the BNP. 5, to discuss and organise the need for community defence. And 6, to discuss and organise the creation of a memorial for Roland Adams. The first aim there noted as to close the BNP headquarters and bookshop as soon as possible. Again, you might think the answer is obvious, but why was this an aim of your campaign?
Well, we did, clearly from my previous statements, we didn't have no idea about the BNP headquarters before my son's death. We subsequently learned that it was set up in 1989, which is 2 years before my son died, and reading, you know, about since they moved into the area that racist attacks had increased dramatically since they moved into the area. Like I said before, it wasn't so much about, nothing we could do for Roland. It was about, trying to make it a safer place for black families and, particularly young black boys who were more the subject of their interest. It's obvious, in my opinion, why we would want it closed. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask that we go to the second paragraph of this document, which is entitled Discussion Around the Documents Submitted by AFA. Just before I go on, do you know what AFA stands for?
I think it's the Anti-Fascist Action or something like that description anyway. Again, it's 30 years ago.
I'm just going to read that paragraph. So AFA, or Anti-Fascist Action, outlined the contents of its 2 documents, including their opinion on objectives and proposals for the way forward for the campaign. It was suggested that Anti-Fascist Action's analysis document be discussed in depth before the meeting moved forward. A heated discussion followed with regard to various paragraphs in the document. There were disagreements with regards to the contents of Anti-Fascist Action's document. Criticisms were made of the contents of the leaflets that were distributed at the march. Criticisms were made on the issues or direction that came out of the march. Anti-fascists were called racist and not listening to the experiences of black people, and Anti-Fascist Action objected to being called racist. It was suggested that a separate meeting be held with Anti-Fascist Action and black groups to discuss their paper. There were no definite conclusions on this, and Anti-Fascist Action walked out of the meeting. To what extent, from your memory, were Anti-Fascist Action involved in the Roland Adams family campaign?
Well, clearly, if they were involved in our campaign, judging from their idea of moving forward, they wouldn't have been heavily involved because my wife and I and the rest of our family were quite keen and on what our aims and objectives were, just like you read them out a while ago. And I mean, anything that would tarnish Roland's memory and our ability to continue our campaign, they would be on the fringe of our campaign. And we welcomed everybody. We didn't exclude anybody. But at the same time, we had a clear agenda of what we wanted. And I mean, there's dozens of other organizations out there if they so wish to join, but we had a clear agenda on what we wanted. So,
were you aware that there were other groups that had strong opinions as to how the campaign might be run?
Yes, because we had open and frank discussions, and we knew what we wanted, and they knew what our objectives were.
Thank you. We can take that document down. Mr. Adams, can you tell us sort of generally some of the activities that the Roland Adams Family Campaign did from when it began in 1991? I mean, we saw earlier the exhibit we put up with the graphic you designed. That was advertising a demonstration, I think, on the 27th of April 1991. And were there other marches or demonstrations that you took part in?
What you mean, separate to our own?
Or in addition to your own?
Well, I think that, you saw that Orville Blair, I think it was mentioned, who died. I'll go back to what I've said before. I mean, there's nothing that we could do for Roland. We could only use his name to support others. And because we had this momentum, we just thought we could help others with that momentum and move our plight, black people's plight, on a bit further. So we supported Rohit Dougal's family afterwards, who also died in that vicinity. We went and we supported Stephen Lawrence's parents when he died, which happened in very similar circumstances. So whilst we had our agenda and we like closing down a bookshop and bringing about greater awareness of what was going on, and and we had platforms where we spoke on and stuff like that, but we were also very empathetic towards other families who lost children in similar fashion, and that's what we did. We were up and down, and we also, it was national, it wasn't just London.
I'm going to ask now that we talk about some of the reporting on the campaign by the officers. Can we please bring up document UCPI 9876, which is B1 in the bundle? UCPI 19876. Thank you. Mr. Adams, this is an intelligence report attributed to an officer, HN90, cover name Mark Kerry. This mentions, this document dated the 30th September 1991 and obviously mentions the Roland Adams Family Campaign at the bottom. And this relates to a picket of the Old Bailey for the first day of the trial of Mark Thornborough, who we've explained was later convicted of Roland's murder. I'll read the report. The trial of those accused of murdering Roland Adams, the young black man killed on the Thamesmead Estate, London, SE28, earlier this year, begins on Monday the 7th of October 1991 at the Old Bailey. The Roland Adams Family Campaign has called for a picket of the court from 9:30 on that day. The Socialist Workers' Party has advertised this in both its weekly newspaper and its weekly letter to branch committees, namely Party Notes. However, the latter does not give any instructions or directives to SWP branches, which indicates that SWP attendance will be limited to a few members selling the party's newspapers. Do you remember, were you aware in advance that the SWP, the Socialist Workers' Party, had advertised this picket?
I wasn't necessarily aware that they had advertised it, but I had a good relationship with some of the members. Some of the members are still a friend of mine now to this day, 30 years later. So, knowing how they operated, I would sort of suspect that they would do something to support the attendance of supporters to the cause, really, yeah.
So was there some sort of a relationship at that time between the family campaign and the SWP, or was it more personal with you?
It was more individuals. It was more individuals within the Socialist Working Party that, I can speak for myself. My wife and I formed some friendships with individuals from all sections of groups and organization who supported the same things that we did. We more gravitated to individuals more than the function of or the ethics of an organization. It's more about the individuals. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we take that down and can we move to document UCPI 28229, which is at B2 of the hard copy bundle? Thank you. Now, this is a report focused on an individual whose name we can see is redacted for privacy. But if we just focus on the body of the report, it says privacy. is an active member of the Newham Monitoring Project and would appear to be third in pecking order to Umesh Desai and Privacy. Privacy chaired the recent Al Sharpton meeting at Friends Meeting House on behalf of the Roland Adams Family Campaign. Privacy strongly believes in the physical street campaign against the fascist and has proved this on numerous occasions, including when arrested in November 1987 whilst combating the BNP. Privacy's commitment to anti-fascist activity is beyond reproach. Firstly, do you have any memory of this person chairing a meeting where Reverend Al Sharpton came to speak to the campaign?
No.
Do you remember Reverend Al Sharpton coming to speak to the campaign?
Well, Reverend Al Sharpton contacted us. I've said as much. We didn't get much traction, if that's the word, from the British media and stuff like that. Nobody was interested in my son's death, really, especially the racist element of it. And Al Sharpton contacted my wife and I, and wanted to empathize with us and help us to bring about justice and support for our family and others. So we sort of knew him personally. Yeah, it wasn't sort of like this person just turned up. We knew him. In fact, we still know him. He spoke at my wife's funeral lately. 33 years later, we still know him.
And just the second part of that report, I know you've said you don't remember who this individual, who the report is about, is, but were you aware of anybody involved in the campaign who was known to be particularly interested in a physical campaign or physical confrontation with the BNP or with fascists?
No. If you look at all of the literature that we've had, even because even the ARA, came out of our campaigning and all that, and their ethos is non-violence. Everything about the literature that we've ever put out and everything that we've ever believed in, it was about ensuring that our young black men stayed out of trouble. We were never a campaign. If anybody thought different, that was never put to us, but that was our ethos, that was our mission statement, that was our mantra, that was everything about us.
Can we now move? I'm going to look at another of the exhibits that you've provided, Mr. Adams, which is document UCPI 37056. This is another set of meetings. That's A32 in the hard copy. There's another set of minutes of a Roland Adams Family Campaign meeting held this time on the 20th of February 1992. It says the attendance, there are about 30 people present. And I just want to focus on the body of the report about stewarding. This time, February 1992, it seems like it's going to be talking about stewarding for a particular march. I don't know if you remember which march it would have been. But I'm just going to read the following. So, 1, stewarding. Lee reported meetings of stewards had taken place. Each steward will have a briefing note. Final briefing at St Nicholas Gardens, 10 a.m. Saturday. Privacy and Lee attended a police briefing. 4 instances in which the police would intervene in the march. Disputes on the march, for example, between the ARA and the ANL. Physical attacks on officers. Physical attacks on the BNP bookshop or attack on the march. It was reported that the police numbers on the day would be very substantial. And then further down, it says, Privacy noted that the chief stewards are calling for a peaceful demonstration. All stewards and all those attending will be asked to respect that. Lee noted that it was crucial that the order of the march was respected, otherwise this would be a source of trouble and police intervention. Privacy proposed that the order of the march be changed to bring the ANL further to the front. Privacy and Audrey explained that the order had been decided at the previous meeting and it was not open for discussion. It was noted that it was important that if there was any violence or police attack, that the organisers and participants on the march were seen as the victims and the police or BNP, etc., as responsible for the violence. And it was agreed that they would organise a symbolic laying of a wreath, etc., at the bookshop. Would you say that where it says it was crucial that the order of the march would be respected, otherwise this would be a source of trouble and police intervention, that the Roland Adams Family Campaign, is this how they usually participated in such marches?
Yes. It says Audrey there. That's my wife. She and together, if I wasn't there, she would be there, or another family member would be about on most of these meetings, and it's quite clear. We weren't out there for retribution or anything like that. We wanted change.
There's reference in this document to the ANL. Is it correct that the ANL here stands for the Anti-Nazi League?
Yeah.
And so can we take from this that they were one of the organisations that were taking part in this demonstration with you?
Well, the ANL is an organisation that was disbanded before Roland died, and it came alive again after Roland died. Yeah.
And what sort of support did you receive from the ANL?
Well, like I've mentioned before, we're just one family. The black community wasn't being listened to, or our plight, wasn't taken seriously. So any support that we could that we could get, we had our mission statement, we had our aims and objective. Anybody that would come around us and support our aims and objectives were welcomed.
I'm now going to take us to 3 intelligence reports in a row that refer to the ANL and the RAFC. The first is UCPI 28150. That's B4 in the hard copy bundle. This is a report, you can see at the top, is attributed to HN78 Trevor Morris. And it records the following. In an attempt to bring itself to the forefront in the fight against racism and fascism, the relaunched Anti-Nazi League has organised a mass leafleting campaign in the Tower Hamlets area on Sunday the 2nd of February 1992. And then paragraph 3, the ANL is putting its weight behind the Roland Adams Family Campaign demonstration due to be held in Thamesmead on Saturday the 22nd of February 1992. Leaflets advertising these events were submitted with this report. Can we go to a second document, please? UCPI 28250, B5 in the hard copy bundle. This is a second report by officer, attributed to Officer HN78, dated the 7th of February 1992. Can we have the second part of the paragraph up, please? Yes, that's there. On the 22nd of February, the ANL intends to give mass support to the demonstration called by the Roland Adams Family Campaign to close the British National Party Welling headquarters. This event will be a London-wide mobilisation with SWP members from outside the capital also being encouraged to attend, especially if they are accompanying ANL non-SWP members. Activists are also being urged to fly post as many bills as possible advertising the event in order to build a real awareness of the action. And it says the demonstration will assemble at 12 noon, St Nicholas Church, Plumstead High Street, SE 18. And finally, I just want to take us to document UCPI 19915, B6 in the hard copy bundle. This intelligence report, dated the 14th of February 1992, is attributed to Officer HN90. And at the bottom we can see it says, the Anti-Nazi League, ANL, appears to be efficiently and enthusiastically organising support for the Roland Adams Family Campaign demonstration to march and demonstrate outside the BNP bookshop in Welling. On a local level, housing estates are being leafleted and fly-posted to advertise the event. In the Battersea and Brixton areas, buses have been booked to take protesters to the event. The SWP, the main drive behind the Anti-Nazi League, will be calling for a London-wide mobilisation of its members, and indications so far suggest that the event will be well attended by the SWP and its supporters. Mr. Adams, do you consider those reports to be accurate in terms of the level of support afforded to your campaign by the Socialist Workers' Party and or the Anti-Nazi League?
Yes.
Can we move to document UCPI 28278, B8 in the hard copy bundle? This intelligence report, attributed again to Officer HN78, dated the 26th of February 1992. We can see it's called an event pro forma. Gives the date 22nd of February 1992. The organisation is named as the Roland Adams Family Campaign, and the nature of the event was a march to the British National Party HQ in Welling, followed by a rally. Just read the first paragraph. The ARA, is it correct that that stands for the Anti-Racist Alliance?
Yeah.
Who organised the march in conjunction with the Roland Adams Family Campaign, had made it known in an open letter to the SWP that should any violence occur, it would be construed as Anti-Nazi League orchestrated, and the SWP ANL leadership therefore had instructed their comrades, whilst en route to the venue, that the demonstration should not be allowed to degenerate into physical conflict, as this would only detract from the issues involved and erode future ANL support. Can you tell us, first of all, you mentioned it earlier in your evidence, but just to be clear, did you say the Anti-Racist Alliance came out of the Roland Adams Family Campaign?
I don't know if it came out. I think that they saw it as a... I'm speculating. I think it was disbanded before. I don't know when it was disbanded, but it wasn't about before Roland died. And it came alive again subsequently.
And what sort of relationship did the Roland Adams Family Campaign have with the Anti-Racist Alliance?
Like I've said before, with most of the organizations that came to support us, we had relationships with individuals within those organizations rather than the tier at the top, for instance. I don't think my wife and I knew necessarily who were at the top or at the bottom. We just had relationships with individuals within those organizations.
The report obviously refers to instructions to the members of the SWP, the ANL, that this particular demonstration, your demonstration, should not be allowed to degenerate into physical conflict. Did the Roland Adams Family Campaign have a position on whether violent or physical confrontation at these demonstrations was permitted or not permitted?
Like I've said before, we've always, with all the other documents that we've been through before, it's quite clear that we did not want our children to become perpetrators.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Adams, I'm just going to ask you about the impact that the knowledge that the campaign was reported on has had on you and your family. When did you first become aware that the undercover officers of the Special Demonstration Squad had reported on the Roland Adams Family Campaign?
It was our brief that told us about the undercover policing, that we were subjected to that. Yeah, but as a family, we, like I've said before, we often felt that we were under some sort of surveillance, or that my son's whereabouts in hospital, or these renegades knew where we lived, and all the rest of it. We always suspected that we were under some sort of surveillance, by whom, who knows.
And when you were told that the campaign had in fact been reported on, what was your initial reaction?
I think my son put it quite well, actually, in one of his statements. He realized that he wasn't paranoid after all. Yeah, yeah. I think that my wife and I were similarly the same, because we felt that we were subject to surveillance for a long time, whether it be local police surveillance, or whether it was this special squad. But we felt that we, there was just too much, coincidences out there. I mean, we had family homes that was broken into, nothing taken but, stuff that is of no interest to a burglar and stuff like that. So we often felt that we were under some sort of surveillance, and I mean, we felt more vindicated to know that what we thought was true was in fact true. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I don't have any further questions for you, but there may be some more questions to come.
Mr. Adams, part of our processes involve a quarter of an hour break at the end of the principal evidence given by a witness such as yourself, so that if there are any questions from other participants, they can be put to Ms. Jones and she can ask you. So we'll break for a quarter of an hour. Yes. Mr. Bruce-Jones.
Yes, thank you, sir. I have no more questions, but my learned friend for the witness, I think, will have some questions.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, just to tie up a few loose ends, please, I just want to go back to the issue of police spying on the family, which you touched upon in multiple respects. But I think the easiest way to do this is to take you to your witness statement and have you elaborate, if you wish to, on anything you say there. So could we have on the screen, please, UCPI 37041, please, which is the statement of Mr. Adams, page 12, paragraph 4.22, please. Now, you mentioned the family liaison officer, P.C. Fisher, during your statement. What you say in relation to that in your witness statement is this. I'll just read it out and you can perhaps follow on the screen. P.C. Fisher used to just come round telling us things. He came unannounced. It was like a policeman coming round to try and show empathy. It didn't feel like the empathy was real. It didn't feel like his role was planned supportive policing. He seemed to be trying to tease information from us. He wanted to find out who the individuals were who were visiting us. He tended to stay in our house for long enough so he could see who was there. Sometimes there were people in other rooms. He also asked about the campaign and what we were doing. We had nothing to hide. We were trying to increase awareness in the community. We answered his questions. I mean, does that summarize your impression of the family liaison officer's visits to your home?
Yeah. There wasn't any empathy or any genuine warmth or anything like that, and it just felt like it was information gathering more than support for the family. Yeah.
And I mean, I know it's a long time ago, but I mean, how many times do you remember him coming round the house in the manner you describe in this paragraph?
It was a long time ago, and that's all I can say. I can't remember how many times he came, but it wasn't something that we look forward to, or that we could reach out to him for anything.
Thank you. Could we turn to page 14, please, in paragraph 4.26? Now, in the earlier paragraph, you talked about the issue of the police releasing some of the perpetrators on bail. That's the context in which you say at 4.26, at the same time, the police were using their resources to stop our family members when they were coming to visit us. We felt as if the police considered us to be the greater threat and more demanding of being policed than those who had threatened us. Family members and friends who were stopped and searched included my brother and then various other individuals unnamed. There were many others. Is that square with your recollection now about people being stopped?
Well, we were very angry, and what was even more frightening is that they sort of knew who my family were before they even arrived at our house, if you will. They were stopping them. Yeah.
And is that part of the awareness that you described earlier, it's sort of knowing that you were under surveillance?
Yeah.
Is this an example of that?
Yeah.
At 4.28, same page, this is in relation to the moving out of the house. The threats to us as a family became such that Ros Howells from Greenwich Commission for Racial Equality, that's Baroness Howells you mentioned earlier, yes? And Noel Penston from the local authority, both of whom had been supporting us, came round to our house and said we were in such danger that we had to move house immediately. Yeah. We had asked the police for protection. The police said that they did not have the staff to protect us unless we agreed to have an officer in our house the whole time. We could not accept that. We did move house away from the area. Is that right? That was the only style of police protection that you were offered at the time?
Well, yeah, and if my son knows this too, but we were very frightened for him more than anything because he became increasingly the attention of the police. Yeah.
Next, I just want to ask you a few questions finally on your overall perception of racist violence in southeast London. You've explained already that you had no idea at the time of Roland's murder how bad it was. Otherwise, you would never have chosen to live there. But it's about what you discovered afterwards, and you deal with this starting at.
In part, I am, my wife and I, were I don't even know how to put this, but I think that we felt that we probably should have done more due diligence, and in hindsight, we thought we should have done more diligence, and I think that that's what this awareness was. This bringing about awareness is trying to educate other black families about the area. We didn't have the opportunity to know about the area before we moved there. And I think part of our campaign was about bringing about that awareness so other families wouldn't sleepwalk into the nightmare that we had. Yeah.
Thank you. Could we have page 22, please, of the statement? And the two top paragraphs there, Mr. Adams, where you say this. I consider that if the BNP, racist gangs and criminal gangs associated with them had been effectively policed, then at least some of the racist violence and murders could have been prevented. That's what effective policing means. Effective policing can obviously include undercover policing. Learning about the undercover policing of the Roland Adams Family Campaign, the groups that supported us, and other justice and community campaigns makes me ask why? Why us? Why not focus on the racist criminal gangs? Who set those priorities? What does it say about policing racist murderers and drug dealers? They carry on and we remain unprotected but spied on. You wish to elaborate on that at all?
I'm asking questions here, and I'm hoping that my wife and I, by making these statements and putting question marks after the questions, we are hoping that the inquiry can provide some of these answers.
And finally, at the bottom of the same page at 6.20, so the overall impact of what I have learned to date about the spying on us has made me feel that the wrong people were being policed. Black people and victims of crime appeared to be more concerning to the police than the racist gangs and right-wing parties. They were not effectively policing the criminals. This makes me sad, disappointed, and angry. It also makes me ask why. I and the public need to know what was happening in relation to policing racist criminal gangs and the right-wing parties, and why. Was the focus on us and not them as it now seems? Again, you're posing questions.
Yeah.
And those remain questions that you want answered now, all these years later?
Well, none of them have ever been answered. And, part of participating in this inquiry for both my wife and I is about whether or not this inquiry can glean anything that we don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's all I ask.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adams, may I personally thank you for coming to give evidence. Like everybody in the room, I suspect, I have been impressed by the calmness, frankness, and dignity with which you have done it. You raise an important question, which Mr. Mendes dealt with in his last series of questions to you, about infiltration of groups other than left-wing environmentalist groups and so forth. I am looking into that, but I must do that largely in closed, and any report on it will largely have to be enclosed as well. And that may mean that your hope that you will discover from me what was done about that part of undercover policing may not be fulfilled. You can rest assured I will do it, but you may not learn the outcome. We will now break until about 12 o'clock so that the next witness, John Burke Monaville, can prepare himself to give evidence.
hand, please, and take the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Please sit down.
Yes, Mr. Warrington.
Mr. Burke-Monaville, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Could you tell us your full name, please?
My full name is John Lincoln Burke Monaville.
I think it's right, Mr. Burke-Monaville, that you made a witness statement to assist the inquiry, which is dated the 28th of June of this year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That statement, together with the exhibits that you've provided, consists of 50 pages. Is that right?
That is right.
Now, some of the events that you refer to in your witness statement occurred a long time ago. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Because events happened a long time ago, you've made reference to and relied on a number of contemporaneous documents where they have been available to you. Is that right?
That is quite right.
And is it right that reminding yourself of those documents has helped you to provide some of the content of your witness statement?
That is true. Not all, but as you said, some, yes.
Are the contents of your witness statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
That is correct.
Mr. Burke-Monaville, that puts the whole of your witness statement into evidence, and if not already, it should appear on the inquiry's website in due course.
Thank you.
Now, in a moment, Mr. Burke-Monaville, I want to ask you some questions about the Trevor Monaville Defence Campaign, which was set up in order to pursue justice on behalf of your son, Trevor, who had sustained significant injuries in circumstances where he ended up in police custody. And I also want to ask you about intelligence reporting filed by undercover police officers that referred to that campaign, all right?
Thank you.
Before I do that, I just want to ask you a little bit about you, your family, and Trevor, all right? I
Of
think
course.
I think your wife, Linda, sits beside you to support you in giving evidence this afternoon. Is that correct?
That is quite correct. She asked me this morning, could she be near me to cuddle me if I break down?
In front of you is a photograph of Trevor. Is that right?
This particular?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask for that image to be put up on the screen. When was Trevor born, Mr. Burke-Monaville?
That is 1967. I think it's the 27th. You got me there.
Well, a long time ago, 1967.
Long time ago. There are many things I do remember, and some, I have a very large family.
Well, my father doesn't remember my birthday either, Mr. Burke-Monaville, but
Please forgive me.
not at all. He's got no excuse. How old is Trevor in that image that you see in front of you?
19.
19. Now, Trevor, very sadly, was killed on the 18th of March of 1994. Is that right?
That is right. I remember this one.
Yes. And it's right that his murder remains unsolved. Is that correct?
Yes, sadly, yes.
And I think Trevor was born to a previous partner of yours. Is that right?
That is quite right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Trevor was like as a child?
Trevor was a very, very, very nice young man. When Trevor was born, we lived in Stratford. Soon after that, we moved to Welling in Kent,
Yes.
and he was doing okay. I believe that at school in Greenwich, that's when it all started, when I parted with my first partner, who was his mother. And things went a little bit sour for Trevor then. We moved back to Hackney, and things seems to have got very, very, very worse for Trevor then. But through all these things that did happen to Trevor, he always remained a family boy.
Yeah.
A kind heart, good nature, loving. But he changed a lot after this particular thing happened to him. It was like the days of nursing him again. I had to nurse him to understand everything that was necessary for a young man of his age to know.
Yes.
And he was such a lad then that we miss him greatly. He was a nice boy, he had his faults, but he was what you call a loving member of a large family. And after losing him, we suffer a lot.
Yes. He was 19 years old when he was injured, is that right?
Yes.
So the age that he is in this image that appears before us, is that right?
This particular one, yes.
Yeah. And was that photograph taken before or after he sustained his injuries? Can you remember?
No, I do not.
All right.
I need to explain that to you because of what has happened to Trevor.
Yes.
I personally haven't got any photographs of Trevor.
I see.
All the other members of the family have. But I find it too painful looking at him day after day. So I keep no photograph of him at all.
All right.
I just want to remember him the last time I saw him alive.
Let's take the image down, please.
No, please don't.
All right.
It refreshed my mind.
Are you happy to have it open in front of you?
Yes, yes.
All right, well,
I have not seen it for years.
if at any point it becomes too difficult, Mr. Burke Monaville, you let us know and we can make arrangements to have it taken down.
I will, plus I have my referee next to me.
Now, in the period before Trevor sustained his injuries, what was he like as a young man? Was he in good health?
He was in excellent health,
Was he an active young man?
very active.
What sort of things did he enjoy doing?
Football, cricket, rugby, and he liked, what's that game? Martial arts,
Martial arts.
yes.
I want to move on now to what happened to Trevor in 1987, all right? And you deal in your witness statement with the circumstances in which Trevor came to get hurt, so far as you've managed to ascertain them to be. With your assistance, I just want to go through a little bit of about what happened with Trevor, and if you think any important details been missed out, please just say so,
I will do.
and you can fill us in, all right? Now, I think Trevor was out with two of your sisters, so two of his aunts, for New Year's Eve,
That is
just
right.
after midnight, yeah?
That is correct, yes.
That was Thursday, the 1st of January, 1987, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And there came a time when he found himself alone outside a club waiting for your sisters to leave, is that correct?
Well, what happened was, as I was told, that the two girls and himself got to the place,
Yes.
And they went in to have a look what it was like in there. Trevor waited outside. On their return to report to him, shall we go in or go home? They couldn't find him.
No. Did they look for him?
Yeah, they complained to me and I started looking. They looked before they left the area. I went back to the area and searched all over.
And what area sorry, I interrupted you, but what area are we talking about, Mr. Burke-Monaghan?
Church Street, Stoke Newington.
Yes. Was Trevor the sort of young man that would go off without telling anyone?
Not with those two girls that he was with. They were as close as glue.
I think it's right that you were unable to track Trevor down until a few days later, Sunday the 4th of January. Is that right?
That is quite correct.
All right. Well, we'll look at in a moment what happened in the intervening days, all right?
Thank you.
What was the first thing that you did when you found out that Trevor had gone missing?
The first thing I did was I walked into Stoke Newington police station and asked them if they had Trevor in custody, because I know Trevor was having slight problems with his memory.
Yeah.
And they said they did not have him.
Was that on the day of his disappearance, the 1st of January?
Yes.
And I think you've just told us, but just to confirm, you were told that he wasn't at Stoke Newington police station.
Yes.
Did you continue to make inquiries of the police over the next few days?
I did. The second day, I went to the police station to make inquiries again with a photograph of Trevor, I believe, on the second day. They still maintained they did not have him in custody.
So are we into the 2nd of January now?
Yes.
And was it just Stoke Newington police station that you approached, or did you deal with any other of the local police stations?
We had members of the family phoning hospitals,
Yeah.
phoning all the family that we know Trevor could have gone to. I phoned many establishments,
Yes.
asking about him, whether they've seen him. We had no success of that at all.
Now, over the few days between Trevor going missing and you finding out where he was on the Sunday, all right, on the 4th of January, so in that period, were the police able to assist you with Trevor's whereabouts at all?
Not at all. I believe that on the second day when I went to the police station with a photograph of Trevor, I do apologize for not saying that before. I cannot remember every single action at that time. But I was told that he's a 19-year-old
Yes.
by the custody officer. Maybe he has scored for the night.
I see.
That was what I was told.
You explain in your witness statement that the day after Trevor went missing, so the 2nd of January, you formally completed the missing person's paperwork at Stoke Newington police station. Do you remember doing that?
That is quite true.
And were the police able to assist you with any information at that stage?
Not at all, sir. That was the time when they told me the story about when he might have scored for the night. He's a young 19-year-old.
Might have scored for the night, is that right?
Yes,
What did you understand by that?
well, at the time, maybe his luck has changed for the night.
I see. Now, after you'd gone through that formal process of reporting Trevor as missing and tracking him down on the Sunday, did the police contact you at any
Not
stage?
at all. Not at all. The police didn't contact me. Eventually, I phoned many prisons. And then finally, I had an answer at Brixton from a Mr. Not supposed to mention names.
All right.
And
You
he
spoke
told
to
me-
someone at Brixton Prison?
Yes.
All right.
Told me he had a young man in custody that since he got him, he has not responded at all. I asked his description and he told me the description. So I decided to rush down there.
All right.
I got there, I was told to wait, but eventually arrangement was made for me to see the person, and it turned out to be Trevor. I was shocked. Truly, truly, truly shocked. The only thing I could have said to him, boy, you got a good body on you. Hold on in here, I'll be back. And he asked me, why, Dad? Why did they arrest me?
Just to understand your evidence correctly, is it somebody at the prison who told you that they had a young man in their custody, or was it the police who told you?
Prison officer.
Prison officer. All right.
He was in charge of that wing.
Were you told anything about Trevor's condition by the person you spoke to at the prison?
He told me the young man had not responded at all to anything since he had him in, yeah.
I think it's right in your witness statement, Mr. Bert Monaville. This is for your benefit at page 4, paragraph 1.8. You explained that you were told that Trevor was incoherent, is that right?
That is quite true.
And you were also told that he had soiled himself, is that right?
Yes.
Now, as a result of finding out that Trevor was in prison, did you re-engage with the police?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I went back to Stoke Newington police station and asked questions about Trevor. And it was, I'm not sure whether it was the same day or the next day, that we were told that a story that he was found in a car, covered up. The glass was broken and he was inside the car, covered up.
I think, just to clarify, it was the car that was covered up, not Trevor, is that right?
The car was covered up with the window broken.
Right.
So
And
they arrested him.
who did you speak to, a police officer?
Custody officer.
Custody officer, all right. And were you told anything about the condition Trevor was in when the police located him?
They said the owner of the vehicle went to go out on an errand with his vehicle. He found the window broken.
Yeah.
And Trevor was inside in the back seat. So they took him to court, charged him with criminal damage. He was so ill for them to take him upstairs to court that the magistrate had to come down to see him in the cell and committed him to Brixton Prison.
I see. Before we just move on to what happened with Trevor, just casting your mind back, please, to that point in time where you'd found out he was in Brixton Prison and you'd gone back to Stoke Newington Police Station.
Yeah.
At that stage, were the police able to tell you anything about where Trevor had been
Not at all.
between the 1st
No, they
of
did
January?
not tell me anything. It was when I went back to them and they realized that I had found Trevor.
Yes.
And they had him in prison. I went back home after going to the police station and tell everybody where he was. Soon after that, we had a phone call that he's been rushed to hospital.
I see.
So we ran to the hospital ourselves.
Now we'll go on to that in due course, Mr. Burt Monaville, but I just want to ask you a couple of more questions about the period of time when Trevor had been arrested, between Trevor having been arrested by the police and Trevor ending up at Brixton Prison, all right? So the period of time between his arrest and the court proceedings that resulted in him ending up in Brixton Prison. Did you find out anything about whether Trevor had been taken to hospital whilst he was in police custody?
They did not tell me that.
They didn't tell you. Did you find out anything about that later?
Later, yes.
All right. And I think it's right that you found out that he'd been taken to Homerton Hospital by the police twice whilst he was in their custody. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that we didn't find out about that until after a little while. We found out about that from the custody record.
I see.
Yes, that he was taken to hospital.
So sometime later you had access to the custody record, which is a written document of his time in police custody, isn't it? And that's when you realised for the first time that Trevor had to be taken to hospital more than once whilst he was in police custody. All right.
I must let you know again that I might not have all my stories blow by blow
I see.
because I remember everything now that you're asking me questions that happened. But I do not believe I have them in the proper sequence.
Don't worry, Mr. Burt Monaville. You've provided a very detailed witness statement which stands as part of your evidence.
Thank you, sir.
You can use it to refresh your memory as much as you like.
Yes.
And you're giving it 1.9 on page 4 that you learned that Trevor had been sent to prison on the Saturday, so the 3rd of January. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's when you found out he'd been produced at the magistrate's court, wasn't well enough to physically be brought up to a courtroom and then remanded in custody to Brixton Prison, yeah?
That is quite true. At the time when all these things happened, I was in the prime of my life, but now I've aged to 80s plus.
Yes.
So I cannot, as I mentioned before, put everything into sequence. But I can answer your questions. Please forgive me for that.
Nothing to forgive, Mr. Burt Monaville. Now, you also found out that he, whilst in prison, Trevor was described as being in a comatose state, is that right?
Well, I found him in that state.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had swelling and bruising to his left eyelid, is that correct?
All over, including bruises under his feet,
Yeah.
the sole of his feet.
Scratches across his wrists was something else that I think was
Well,
noted.
his whole body had bruises.
Yeah.
I couldn't get his clothes off, but what I did see, it was every part of the body that I saw.
And I think it's right, you discovered that on the day of his remand to prison, so on the Saturday, he was taken to King's College Hospital for treatment, is that right?
Yes, Before, as I mentioned previously, before I could get organized after seeing him in prison, when I finally got home after the police station, we had a phone call telling us that he was rushed to the Maudsley Hospital.
Maudsley, okay.
Yeah.
He was eventually returned to prison, is that correct?
Yes. No, not from the Maudsley, no.
No, all right.
From the Maudsley, I had to rush there to give permission for them to
Ah, yes. Forgive
operate on
me.
his head.
All right. We're cross purposes, all right? So I think you're slightly ahead of time than me.
Yes, yes. As I said, sir,
Don't worry.
I know the story, but to put it in everyday likeness, that is my problem.
Don't worry. Just sticking with the Saturday when he first ended up at Brixton Prison, I think you explain in your witness statement that he had to be taken to King's College Hospital,
Yes.
where bruising across the shoulder